Insects were the most troublesome to deal with. Their shells were quite hardy, they always moved around in large groups, and each individual possessed pretty high combat potential as well. The sounds of the insect legs rustling on the ground noisily reverberated throughout the cave. It meant that they had come pretty close now. Wang Dongseok raised his shield right up below his chin. However, they couldn't see any insects even then. His Dongxings began raising a fuss from behind him. What's going on here? Why can't I see them? But they are close by, though. Dongseok Hyung, can you see anything out in front? It was at this time that Jinwoo shouted out, above you. What? Wang Dongseok reflexively looked up. Huge insects were running towards them on the ceiling. If they were discovered late even for a single second, those things would have jumped down on top of their heads. When fighting against monsters such as these insect types that formed large groups, the breaking down of the team's formation would mean death for everyone involved. If those were discovered too late, then Wang Dongseok felt a chill run down his spine. The silver lining here was that he couldn't spot a single ant-like creature among the various insects. He raised his voice and shouted out, "Fire, fire and bring them down. Once they are on the ground, I'll attract the aggro." From here onwards, the capability of the tanker would prove to be crucial. Wang Dongseok activated his provocation skill to attract the gazes of all the monsters to himself. And as if they had a prior agreement, monsters all turned their heads to glare at Wang Dongseok at the same time. Dozens upon dozens of monsters rushed towards Wang Dongseok's position. His shield managed to defend against the attacks of the bugs without fail. The strong jaws and claws couldn't tear the shield in half. The tanker Wang Dongseok defended commendably well from the front, all stable and unmoving. Attack! Along with that short but manly shout, all the accumulated firepower of the team poured out on the marauding insect horde. The pained screams of the monsters rose up from here, there, and everywhere. Jinwoo stood at the back and observed this situation as it unfolded. That was the contractual obligation he had to adhere to for this raid. He inwardly simulated how he'd fight alone as his eyes continued to take in the battle happening in front. How frustrating. Jinwoo had to suppress his urges to rush out there several times already. He could see so many open gaps within the ranks of the monsters, and he also spotted the hunters missing those gaps and continue to commit simple errors. So, how could he not feel frustrated when he was not allowed to do anything and simply had to stand around? Even then, the damage to Wang Dongseok's team proved to be surprisingly non-existent. It was all because their teamwork was rather excellent. It seemed that the relaxed demeanor of Wang Dongseok before the raid began was not just for a show, after all. Perhaps because they've been working together for so long, they were able to communicate quite smoothly. Being able to communicate quickly like this would inevitably result in an excellent teamwork as well. It was a world apart from the ragtag bunch of hunters brought together by the association. What's more surprising is that this kid turns out to be pretty handy, too. Jinwoo's gaze shifted over to Yu Jin-ho next. When a monster bit into his shield, he kicked it away and swung his sword quickly at it. The expensive sword easily separated the monster's head from its body. For a newbie rank D hunter, he was defending himself admirably well. The end of the battle was drawing nearer. Once the coast was more or less clear, Wang Dongseok issued another order to his Dongxings. Don't forget the magic crystals. We split them exactly 9 ways. Yep, this is my favorite part of the raid. Me too. Wang Dongseok confirmed his giggling Dongxings collecting the loot and walked closer to Jinwoo. We survived all thanks to you. Excuse me. Well, you were the first one to alert us about them monsters coming up from above, weren't you? How did you know, though? It was a gut feeling. Jinwoo came up with a half-cooked story on the spot. Quite obviously, he couldn't come out and say that his perception stat was high, now could he? Oh, really? A gut feeling? Huh. Well, we got lucky today. I don't even want to imagine what might have happened if we didn't discover them in time. Wang Dongseok patted his chest while speaking up. It was then, one of the hunters rummaging through the carcass of the insect gestured at Wang Dongseok to come closer. The Dongxings had all gathered in one spot, so Wang Dongseok went there to join them as well. Something's a bit off about these crawlies. The hunters parted ways when Wang Dongseok arrived, allowing the bearded man to squat down and take a look at the surroundings. He couldn't spot anything out of the ordinary, though. I'm pretty sure that wound didn't come from us. Wang Dongseok's expression crumpled slightly. He took a closer look before raising his voice. Looks like something took a big bite out of it, doesn't it? Right? That's not the only one with wounds like that, you see. Looky here. This one, that one over there, and over there, too. Now he realized why the battle went off so smoothly when compared to the number of the monsters they had to fight. Could it be that these things were fighting against something else? It was then, although it had been for the briefest of all brief moments, Jinwoo still sensed the gazes of the several members of this team landing on him. Their eyes shifted away as soon as Jinwoo displayed a hint of sensing them. With this, he was certain now. As I thought, his initial suspicions proved to be correct. Seeing that their teamwork was so good, they must have been fighting together for a long time already, and without anyone dying, too. However, would such a thing be possible without a healer backing them up? No matter how good hunters were, they were still humans at the end of the day. Inevitably, they would slip up sooner or later. Well, only a short while ago, didn't their formation nearly break apart from the attacks of the bugs? A bigger picture finally formed inside Jinwoo's head and a subtle smile formed on his lips. In the meantime, Yu Jinho smiled brightly and approached closer to Jinwoo. Hyung, did you see it? You saw it, right? With this, I kicked some serious monster ass today, didn't I? Yu Jinho swung the sword around in the air. Seeing this, Jinwoo quietly asked him, "Hey, that sword and the shield, they are really expensive, right?" "Pardon? When I told my dad that I'd be participating in my first raid, he got them for me." "Well, in that case, I think you should keep your wits about you, too." Jinwoo lightly patted Yu Jinho on his shoulder and followed after the other hunters walking deeper inside the dungeon. What is he talking about now, out of the blue? Yu Jinho tilted his head in confusion before chasing after the departing group. The cave seemed to go on forever. However, bizarrely enough, they hadn't come across a single monster as of yet. Since the dungeon was shaped like a long cavern, there was no way that they'd miss each other, too. Could it be that the crawlies at the entrance were everything? No way. Now that would be really strange. Still, there should be a boss at the end, right? Without one, why would a gate remain open, then? The opinions of the hunters were shared among themselves as they roamed the expansive but empty interior of this big dungeon. Hold it. Hwang Dongseok in the lead suddenly stopped walking. He stopped so abruptly that people behind him ran into his back. The hunter whose nose had slammed into the head of the guy in front asked with a sullen expression, "Ouch, what the heck? I need a light over there." Holy SHT. All the hunters spat out low groans. The torn wings, legs, torsos, and even heads of the bugs, remains of the various dead bugs were strewn about everywhere as far as the light shone. The further into the cave the light got to, the greater the amount of the remains they could see. And also, a huge chamber located at the end of it all. "That's the boss's room," someone muttered out softly. Hwang Dongseok nodded his head. "Everyone, get your equipment ready." The hunters quickly armed themselves. Nervousness was evident on the expressions of everyone present, with Hwang Dongseok leading them in. The rest of the hunters cautiously and silently entered the boss's room. However, their silence only lasted for a few seconds afterwards. Jackpot. How much could all of these be? It is a real jackpot, isn't it? Everyone was way too busy gasping out in admiration and happiness, that was why. Mana stones. They were one of the treasures that could be found inside dungeons. Although each stone possessed a lower amount of magic energy compared to a magic crystal extracted from a monster, they almost always were found in large quantity, so if one were able to mine them, one could earn a substantial profit. Besides, the mana stone deposit they had discovered was incredibly large. The entire wall of the huge cave was actually filled up with these stones. Even if we split 9 ways, we're looking at a payout of over 100 million per head. Smiles formed on the faces of the hunters. Yu Jinho had been staying at the back until then, and when he heard those words, he began poking Jinwoo's side with his elbow. "Hyung, show me your copy of the contract." "Why? Just trust me on this one. I'm pretty knowledgeable when it comes to law, you see." "Mr. Leader, this is Jinwoo Hyung's contract. As you can see, there is no clause about splitting the treasure beside the magic crystals earned from the hunting itself." Everyone there caught on to what Yu Jinho was trying to say. It's customary to share the treasures or other rare items found in a dungeon equally among all the participants of the raid. The splitting of the profit, in this case, is different from monopolizing the magic crystals of the monsters one hunted themselves. In other words, the mana stones had to be split 10 ways, not 9. The light within the hunter's eyes changed greatly, but Hwang Dongseok simply smiled and took a step forward. "Of course, we'll be sharing them equally. I know the rules well. We still have some things to take care of before that, though." Hwang Dongseok raised his index finger and pointed to his front. Yu Jinho grandly flinched from that. He thought that he was the one being pointed at, actually. He shuddered slightly and turned his head around to take a look. and finally spotted a spider as huge as a house quietly squatting way over there. Yuck. Yu Jinho began taking hurried steps backwards and covered his mouth after seeing the spider's appearance. As if it was fast asleep, the huge spider didn't even budge an inch from the spot. Around the creature, there were empty shells of the dead insects piled up as high as a mountain. A fair few of them were half-eaten, and there were bodily fluids mixed in among them as well, basically resembling a trash pit full of food waste. That's the boss, huh? Did that thing eat the bugs inside the dungeon? Well, it sure did eat a lot, didn't it? Hunters glared at the spider and passed their opinions one at a time. Wang Dongxiok called the others to gather around. Jin Woo and Yu Jinho, too, stood in front of Wang Dongxiok as well. As you all know very well, as soon as the boss is killed, the gate will start closing up. So, before we kill the spider, let's mine the mana stones first. Everyone nodded their heads. Did you bring along the equipment for the job? The man named Li Qiaojin shook his head. No, who knew we'd find mana stones inside a C-rank dungeon? All the mining equipment is back in the van. Oh, come on now, dude. Didn't this Hyung always tell you to keep it around just in case? My bad. I'm really sorry about this. Li Qiaojin grinned brightly and began apologizing to Wang Dongxiok, the rest of his teammates, and even to Jin Woo. What a bother this has become. In that case, why don't you two stay here and wait? We'll go outside and fetch the equipment in the meantime. When the hunters tried to leave all at the same time, Yu Jinho formed a confused expression and quickly asked them, "Are you telling me and Jin Woo Hyung to remain in the boss room?" Wang Dongxiok smiled with his eyes and replied, "The Beastard is yet to wake up even though we've been talking loudly for a while now. So, I'm sure nothing's going to happen here. Well, there are some things I want to speak to my boys, too, so we'll take a short smoke break as well. But, don't worry, it won't take long." Jin Woo listened to Wang Dongxiok's rather detailed explanations and smirked inwardly. "You've finally revealed your true colors, huh?" The regulations stated that in order to enter a gate ranked C, the minimum number of participants had to be 10. Yet, Wang Dongxiok's team only had 8 members. I'm sure you already know that it's not easy to hire a healer if you're running your own assault party. Well, we've been doing things this way until now, so it'll be fine. Indeed, he stuck to only 8 members, even though his team had entered countless gates ranked C, so much so that he could say this way until now. They obviously have no reason to fill the last 2 spots. They needed a tail that they could cut off at any given moment, after all. There was a reason why they were willing to accept anyone, whether it was a hunter ranked E or a newbie. Jin Woo had figured out Wang Dongxiok's intentions pretty early on, but chose to say nothing. This was what he wanted, actually. Wang Dongxiok smiled deeply and signaled to Zhou Jiuhuan next to him with his chin. "Hey, Jiuhuan, block up the entrance to the boss room. Should I blow it up?" "That's right, but don't block it up completely, okay? We gotta go in there a bit later, too. We mine the mana stones when the spider goes back to sleep with a full belly." The permit they got from the association would last for 5 days. They still had over 4.5 days of leeway. In other words, they would wait, and if the spider didn't go back to sleep, they would simply dispose of it and mine as much as they could before the gate closed shut. They wouldn't be able to mine everything within the hour, but with Xiang Jin Woo and Yu Jinho no longer in the picture, they should be able to avoid losing out too much. With a loud explosion, the entrance of the boss room suddenly caved in. Yu Jinho hurriedly ran towards the entrance. Unfortunately for him, the entrance was completely blocked up by the fallen rocks. He pushed on with all his might, but not a single stone budged. Jin Woo slowly walked over there in the meantime. Yu Jinho was still giving his all to push the blockade of stones away. He said his name was Zhou Jiuhuan. Before the explosion, there was a flash of light. A sorcerer ranked C that controlled light. This was no doubt that Beastard's handiwork. Those sons of BTChes are trying to kill us. They don't want to share the mana stones, so they blocked the exit and let the spider devour us. Wow, you figured that out so quickly, Sherlock. Jin Woo was rolling his eyes in his head, but still played along for the time being. Looks that way. Suddenly, Yu Jinho's reddened complexion paled in an instant. Would that be the look of someone whose blood had gone cold? No need to ask him what happened. There, the silhouette of the giant monster was oh so clearly reflected in Yu Jinho's eyes. Jin Woo turned around. The spider's sleep had been interrupted by that loud explosion, and it was slowly raising its massive body up. The body the size of a house, dozens upon dozens of eyes, that horrifying mouth, 8 long legs. Now that it had begun moving for real, it looked far more terrifying than when it was actually in a deep slumber. Yu Jinho leaked out a fearful gasp. His body had frozen stiff like a statue. On the other hand, Jinwoo kept his sight firmly locked on the spider as he calmly summoned the poison fang of Kasaka from his inventory. You're mine. This was the perfect opportunity to test out his enhanced stats. The poison fang of Kasaka appeared in his right hand, as if it had always been there. Jinwoo gripped the dagger's hilt tightly, the reason why a hunter was called a hunter. From this moment on was when the true hunt would begin. Hang on a second, Hyom. However, Yu Jinho swiftly snatched up Jinwoo's sleeve just as the latter took a couple of steps towards the spider. What are you trying to do? Yu Jinho's hands were shaking pretty bad. Jinwoo used his left thumb to point over his shoulder. Obviously, I'm going to hunt that. Jinwoo had been following around Hwang Dong-seok's group until now for that purpose, in order to monopolize the remaining monsters in the dungeon as soon as Hwang Dong-seok cut the tail and ran away. This was a splendid opportunity to swallow whole all the experience points and magic crystals. Well, only if the boss hadn't devoured every monster in this dungeon. That is, if that hadn't been the case, then he would have profited a lot more, though. What a missed opportunity that was. However, Yu Jinho's facial expression clearly displayed his disbelief, as he had no idea about Jinwoo's special constitution. What is this Hyun rambling on about? There was something he'd heard from someone somewhere before. A person would stop thinking rationally the moment he or she received a mental shock beyond their capability to deal with. The hunter ranked E standing right in front said that he'd hunt the boss of a C-rank dungeon. If this was not an act of irrationality, then what else could it be? Yu Jinho asked again, this time looking rather dumbfounded. Hyun, you want to hunt that thing? For real? Jinwoo scratched the top of his head, looking somewhat troubled, before replying back with a question of his own. What, you want to hunt it, then? Jinwoo controlled his wayward breathing and did his absolute best to calm himself down. He had to remain focused and steady here. He recalled the exact feelings he felt when he stood at the end of the second floor of the Hapjeong Station's instant dungeon. He then recalled seeing the poison fang blue Kasaka for the first time. However, this giant spider in front of him didn't emit as much pressure as that snake did, meaning he could definitely do this. From the get-go, if he thought that this boss was impossible to clear alone, he wouldn't even have stayed here. Slam. If he didn't instinctively tilt his body out of the way, the spider's legs would have penetrated his chest just now. The spider's legs stabbed into the ground behind him before rising up in the air, its joints folding back up, and from the ends of its legs, pieces of the rocky ground fell. Jinwoo evaded the spider's attacks one by one and got closer and closer to the monster. Meanwhile, Yu Jinho couldn't quite believe his own eyes. Wow, what the hell is up with this guy? Even though he was watching from afar, those attacks were so ferocious that all the hair on the back of his head was standing up. However, that man was evading them all while standing right in front of the monster, not to mention he was actually getting closer too. Seeing that efficient and calm movement, Yu Jinwoo felt a chill run down his backside. And he's supposed to be an E rank. There was no freaking way. If it was him standing there and not Seong Jinwoo, then he'd be torn into a rag by now. He didn't have any confidence whatsoever to dodge those attacks even once. However, Jinwoo was evading them without making a single mistake. An E rank doing something that a D rank hunter such as himself couldn't even dream of doing. There could only be one explanation for this. He is a fake registrant. Yu Jinho's expression hardened. Out of those highly talented hunters, there were a few who could freely control his or her magical energy. If they felt like it, they could easily fake the results and get a lower ranking. Hunters who got assigned lower ranks than what they should have got in the first place simply by hiding a portion of their magic energy. Such people were labeled as fake registrants. And perhaps more alarmingly, most of those fake registrants carried around rather sinister motives for doing so, such as that serial killer whose hobby was to enter low-ranked dungeons and murder all the other lower-ranked hunters, as only those who were present knew what happened inside a dungeon. There was no better place to commit crimes than the world behind the gates. Yu Jinho nervously swallowed his saliva. Suddenly, Jinwoo seemed far scarier than the spider. And just why did I have to insist on coming to this place? Yu Jinho felt like he'd break out in sobs at any moment now. In the meantime, the spider's attacks poured down without a break. Jinwoo dodged all of those attacks and grew confident of his victory. Having decreased the distance between them little by little, the head of the spider was almost within his reach now. The attack pattern of the spider was rather simple, so he could get close to it pretty easily. For now, I'll aim for its eyes. It was the basics of all basic rules to attack the monster's weak points. So, he decided to attack the eyes of the spider, which looked to be the weakest point in its defenses. As soon as I stabbed my dagger in those eyes, just as Jinwoo made up his mind, he suddenly sensed that the spider's attacks had slowed down for some reason. Was it because his eyes had adjusted fully to the speed of its attacks? It was then, a certain ominous premonition flickered past in his brain. When he took a closer look, the muscles around the vicinity of the spider's mouth were trembling quite imperceptibly. Why is it trying to open its mouth now? Jinwoo had been getting ready to jump up 3 meters and reach the head of the spider, but he sensed something ominous was about to happen. Jinwoo hurriedly changed the direction of his jump from forward to his rear. And then, splash, from the mouth of the spider, dirty and turbid liquid spewed out. Jinwoo rolled on the floor for a second before regaining his balance. He quickly took a look behind him. The spot on the floor he had been standing only until a second ago was now emitting smoke as it got scorched black. Sizzle. Stones on the floor melted away powerlessly. Jinwoo swallowed his saliva after seeing that. If I had jumped forward just now, it wouldn't have been only the floor that was melting right now. Perhaps sensing that Jinwoo had been distracted, the spider rushed towards him in no time. Jinwoo raised his head. By then, the spider was already right in front of his eyes. Swish. Jinwoo jumped up to evade the giant spider's legs. Slam. The beastard's attacks had recommenced. Feeling frustrated now, he decided to attack the legs with his dagger. Unfortunately, the legs were also covered in that thick exoskeleton, and no matter how many times he cut it, he couldn't even nick it once. Jinwoo bit his lower lip. This isn't going to work. The spider only needed its 2 front legs to attack him. But on the other hand, he needed to use his entire body to evade them. It was obvious who would tire out first here. Tiredness. As he thought, his tiredness stat was rapidly rising up. When this stat hit 70, his speed would decrease, and when it reaches 90, his breathing would become too heavy and it'd become that much harder to freely move about. He was running out of time. If I want to get closer to it, then speed. Along with those messages, Jinwoo's body became even faster as if a booster had been activated. Evading the spider's legs had become even easier as a result. He swiftly evaded the spider legs, slamming down like lightning bolts, and in the blink of an eye, arrived before the monster. Taken by surprise, the spider hurriedly spewed out its digestive juice. Jinwoo easily evaded the digestive juice and pounced towards the spider's head. Slash. His dagger slashed at the spider's eyes. Yes, one of the 2 special effects the poison fang of Kasaka possessed had activated successfully. The spider roared out and staggered about. Jinwoo didn't miss this opening. The moment his 2 feet landed back on the ground, he jumped up again and climbed on the spider's body to get to the top of its head. The spider went crazy and swung its legs all over the place, but Jinwoo wasn't going to let those blind attacks land on him. Holes continued to appear on the poor, blameless ground instead. Now standing on top of the spider's head, Jinwoo began stabbing the eyes of the spider with his dagger. Stab, stab, stab. The spider rampaged around this way and that, but Jinwoo endured till the end and continued to shove his dagger into the head of the spider. The spider began tottering about dangerously. It was obviously getting damaged now. Seeing this, Jinwoo's hands picked up speed, and eventually, the huge body of the spider finally tilted to the side. Thud. Along with the final gasps from the spider, several messages popped up in his view. I did it. While covered from head to toe in the spider blood, Jinwoo raised his hands up high. Maybe because it was a boss monster. His level jumped up by 3. Status window. Name, Seong Jinwoo. Level, 21. Class, none. Title, none. HP, 2600. MP, 391. Tiredness, 0. Strength, 53. Stamina, 30. Agility, 38. Intelligence, 30. Perception, 32. Rumble. The cave began to shake just a little. Indeed, he had to get out of this place before the gate closed on him, after all. Just as Jinwoo was about to climb down, he spotted something gleaming brightly in the middle of the spider's head. Is that an item? However, unlike the monsters from the instant dungeon, there was no message about recovered items, nor could he automatically claim them. What could it be, then? Jinwoo pondered briefly before realizing what it was. These things have magic crystals, don't they? No matter how busy he was, how could he forget something so valuable like that? When Jinwoo looked back, he saw Yu Jinho there. Please, put them in here. Yu Jinho then proceeded to carefully tuck in the magic crystals belonging to Jinwoo inside his equipment bag. Next, he reached inside the corner of the same bag and pulled out a thermos, before pouring the flask's content on its lid. Hyungnim, you must be feeling thirsty. Please, drink this. It's water. Indeed, it was a cold, refreshing cup of water, filled right up to the edge. Why is this kid doing something no one asked him to? Gulp, gulp. The water slid down his throat and refreshed him quite nicely. The things you saw in here. Even before Jin-woo could finish his sentence, Yu Jin-ho quickly cut in, as if to say that there's nothing to worry about. Of course, I won't say anything to anyone and take this secret with me to my grave. No, hang on. No need to take it to your grave. It wasn't as if anyone would believe the claim that a Ranky Solid the boss of a rank C gate anyway. Still, the kid was saying he'd voluntarily keep his mouth shut, and that would certainly make his life a bit easier. There was a sudden flash of light, and the rocks blocking up the entrance collapsed. Boom. Afterwards, Wang Dong-seok and his goons rushed into the boss room. As soon as spotting the dead spider behind Jin-woo, their expressions became dumbfounded. What the hell? It's really dead. Did those two hunt it?